An interesting case in courts this week. And again, I did not know this was even the case, but did you know that if you live abroad and you decide you want to vote in a Quebec provincial election, if you've been out of the country for more than 2 years, you couldn't? So at least when I say you couldn't, up until this court decision, which now seeks to overturn this decision. And my understanding is it's going to be, I think they have a year to go ahead. The government does, the current government, to see if they want to change it or how they will change it. But it was all brought about by one person who was actually at the time living in England and wanted to vote in a Quebec election and found that he couldn't. Unless, of course, you flew home and voted in person, which you could do, but that's kind of crazy. Bruno Gélinas-Faucher is an assistant law professor at the University of New Brunswick, is on the line. Mr. Faucher, thanings for being here today. Appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure.
Can you take us back to when this kind of originally came to mind for you and you realized, wow, I didn't know this was even the law at the time, did you?
No, certainly. I mean, it was back in 2019. I was in England doing my PhD, as many Quebecers do. We go study abroad. And we're still linked to Quebec. I was receiving even Quebec government student loans. I was still covered by the Quebec, RAMQ and so on. I was there, and in 2019, I was a by-election in my riding, which was in Jean Talon, Quebec. So I applied to vote through a mail-in ballot, as I did in previous elections, and I was told by the chief electoral officer that essentially I was no longer eligible to vote remotely. I could fly in and put my ballot in the box, in person, because I'm still an eligible voter. But for some reason, the Quebec electoral law took away that right to vote remotely after 2 years. So that's when I said, okay, well, no, that doesn't make sense. And I set about challenging that law. And with the help of a Osler law firm who took on the case, saw the merits, represented me pro bono. We went to court and we challenged that limitation for essentially all other, not just students, but all other Quebecers who are temporarily living abroad who are impacted by that limitation.
Now, for context, from what I read in the article in the press, it didn't used to be 2 years. That got amended before the 1995 referendum. Before that, it had been 10 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the first time that remote voting, mail-in ballot was allowed was 1989. At the time in Quebec and other places in Canada, federally, the limit was much more generous. It was 10 years. And then 1992, there started to be, I would say, political mingling in that issue because there was an upcoming referendum, the Charlottetown referendum, and then the sovereignty referendum in 1995. So the National Assembly, a lot of politicians set about to kind of narrow down that time window because it was thought, and this is not me, this is in the judgment looking at the debates at the time, that, having all those people abroad who wouldn't necessarily vote the right way, so to speak, would not be a good thing for Quebec. And so it was brought down to 2 years. And that's one of the key elements that the judge looked at in this case in the decision. She said, there's no, it's not totally arbitrary the way it was, brought about and how it was limited to this 2-year period. And I mean, she also mentions things like what I mentioned, like the government might have a legitimate aim in trying to keep only those who have, a connection with the province to vote. But the fact that, for example, I was still being financed by the Quebec government through student loans or covered by the RAMQ and so on, it meant that it was completely arbitrary to take away my right to vote at the same time.
So what so you get a victory in court. I think I kind of alluded to the fact that the government, by the way, despite this, the court decision, they will have 1 year to amend the law. Is that correct? How does that work?
Yeah, that's correct. So the first thing that has to be said is that the court struck down the article because it was unconstitutional, right? It was contrary to Section 3 of the Charter, which enshrines the most fundamental and basic right, with the right to vote. And the court found it's a violation of the right to vote. And because it's against the Constitution, the court struck down the limitation. But as the courts do with these types of cases, it doesn't want to create a chaos, vacuum, on the short term. So it tells the government, essentially, I'll suspend my declaration, striking down this law for 1 year so that you can get your things in order, so that you can remedy the violation. But after 1 year, if you haven't done anything, this is going to be struck down. The 2-year limitation is going to be struck down. So essentially, the government has 1 year, to fix this. And it's good timing because, the decision was handed this week, and 1 year brings us to next August, which will be right before the next general elections in October of next year. So thankfully, or hopefully, we'll have a new regime in place for the next general elections where, all the Quebec people living abroad temporarily will be able to vote, including, most notably, students. Yeah. Who are abroad for their studies.
Now, the one other thing in this, again, I think the Simon Jolin Barrette, the justice minister, is quoted as saying he'll look at this, but there's also a potential challenge to the ruling in and of itself, right?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
There's a challenge beyond this idea of amending the law inside of 12 months. There could be potentially a challenge to this court judgment, could there not?
No, I mean, they could appeal the decision.
Right,
I think
that's what I mean.
Right, okay. Yes, so it's always open to the government to appeal the decision. Mm-hmm. And this is, I mean, they certainly have the option. I would certainly say that for anyone who reads the 80 or so pages from the decision, it's certainly a strong, very well-reasoned decision that has broad implication for not just students, but any Quebecer going abroad temporarily. I mean, they could appeal, and maybe appealing would be a sort of delaying tactic, if you ask my opinion, because, it could mean that it would push us perhaps beyond the next election in next October. But yes, it's certainly open to them to appeal. I certainly hope that they do not appeal.
I'm curious of one other thing. You took this on as an individual. You work with a law firm here. You work with Osler, big law firm here. Who assumed the financial cost here?
They were generous enough to do the work pro bono, wow. So for free, and I would not have been able to do it without them. I mean, constitutional, we all take for granted those constitutional rights, like the right to vote, but really, when it comes down to having them to have them respected by the government, it's another matter. This law firm, I came to them with this issue, and they looked at it, and they saw the kind of the strength of the case, and they decided to take this on. So I couldn't be more grateful for their excellent work. And I should note that the court itself noted that the firm did an excellent job and recognized their work, which was, again, pro bono.
Listen, good for you, and I hope, in fact, the government does recognize that, there's no need for this 2-year limit anymore. We'll have to wait and find out. It's also interesting, Bruno, in the scheme of things these days, you're obviously aware that in the U.S., Donald Trump is on a campaign to try to eliminate mail-in voting altogether. I wonder what you think of that.
Well, it's such the timing is very... it tells a lot because the decision comes on the heel of this declaration from Donald Trump where he wants to attack mail-in voting. I certainly hope that we are not going down that path. And thankfully we have courts like the Superior Court this week that will protect and guarantee the right to vote, which is enshrined in our Charter of Rights and Freedom. And I should say this is not just my case is in Quebec, it's for provincial election, but it's certainly a wider movement because we had a similar case at the federal level back in 2018 where a similar provision was struck down for the federal elections in the Frank case. There was also a 5-year limit for right to vote remotely for federal elections. That was also struck down by our court. So thankfully, we are going down a different path from the United States, and I certainly hope that we will continue to protect and guarantee that right to vote that is enshrined in our charter.
Bruno, first of all, I want to thank you for the time. And second of all, congratulations on that challenge and getting what it is that I think most people think ought to be happening, which is the fact that if you live out there, you're getting all this money from Quebec anyway, you should have a right to vote. So congratulations. Well done.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bruno Gélinas-Faucher, now an assistant law professor at the University of New Brunswick. And we shall see what the CAQ government decides to do. First, whether they choose to appeal, and second, whether they'll amend this 2-year term, which, again, the judge said is arbitrary, doesn't need to be there.